The MAGA movement just suffered another pretty big loss in their attempt to narrow folks' rights when it comes to gay marriage and making decisions, private decisions by themselves. Most recently, the Supreme Court denied granting cert in a case that sought to overturn Obergefell, a case that establishes a law of the land that same-sex marriage is a fundamental right that no one can take away. And the MAGA movement tried to set it up so it can be maybe taken away again. And the Supreme Court, despite being stacked with MAGA supporters, rejected the attempt and shut down the MAGA movement's attempt to try to win the culture war on this issue now. We're going to unpack that. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This is another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Remember to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you want to support this network, if you want to keep up with these videos. We appreciate you tuning in here. And this is an important issue. I think it really implicates people's fundamental rights. And it goes to show that the MAGA movement is trying to disassemble folks' fundamental rights. And I think it's important that we cover it. Brian, where do you want to start with this issue today?
Let's start with the procedure here, Sean. I think it's important that people understand about the Supreme Court. So obviously, the Supreme Court makes the rules when it comes to interpreting the law, interpreting the Constitution. But in order for a case to reach the Supreme Court, there has to be a petition for certiorari filed. That means that somebody's asking the Supreme Court to review it. And we talked about this before, between 90 and 100 cases are about as many cases as the Supreme Court accepts a year out of literally thousands that are requesting cert, requesting review. And in order to get a case reviewed, in order for the Supreme Court to even put it on their docket, 4 votes have to come out. And 4 votes have to be from 9 of the 9 justices. So 4 of them have to say, we really want to hear this case. And this case didn't get 4 votes. That tells you a lot right there.
And they want to hear it.
Right. So let's be very clear, though. This case was never heard on its merits by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court let the lower court decision stand. That's what happens when they deny cert. So let's just stop there and make sure that everybody understands the procedural history here. Not a final decision, not a decision on the merits. The Supreme Court simply said, we're not even going to entertain this question.
That's right. And just because it's not final and just because it's not on the merits doesn't mean that they're still looking at overturning it. Look, the folks that brought this challenge, they're going to bring more challenges. They're not going to give up. They're well funded. We'll talk about why they have that funding and how corporate interests are really backing this. So this isn't even about their religious beliefs or religious freedoms. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But right now, this is the law of the land. Obergefell, which was decided a few years ago, which solidified that it doesn't matter. It was 2015, I believe, 10 years ago now. It solidified that gay marriage is a fundamental right. Same-sex marriage. States can't ban it. States, county clerks can't refuse to issue marriage certificates, all of it. That's the law of the land. And that's kind of the context I think we need as the starting point. But I guess we can even back up and talk about sort of the long history of same-sex marriage in this country. One of the important cases, Brian and I were talking about this, and I think, Brian, you said this was decided when you were in law school in 1986, Bowers versus Hardwick, which was a challenge to Georgia's anti-sodomy laws, which really criminalized same-sex intimacy of any kind, much less marriage, of course, will be swallowed up by that. But the Supreme Court upheld that law. And since then, the sentiment and public, even public position on this has changed. There's been a number of cases that have come down since then. Lawrence v. Texas came down in, I believe, 2003. And that struck down the sodomy laws as a violation of due process. And after that, you had a few more cases that really shaped this. And ultimately, it all culminated with Obergefell, the 2015 decision where 5-4, it was decided that states are required to recognize same-sex marriages and they can't ban it. The majority opinion, I think, there was written by Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, some of whom are still on the court, obviously.
So yeah, let's stop there for a second because I want to talk about the import here. So if we go back to the very beginning of the century, the public opposition to gay marriage was a little less than 60%. So 60, if you ask 10 Americans, 6 Americans would say they didn't think gay marriage should be legalized. That was a mere 25 years ago, 25 years ago. And now today, well over 70% of Americans support or accept the notion of gay marriage, right? I mean, there's obviously still a percentage that doesn't. And interestingly, I just want to point this out. The percentage that doesn't is a little less than the diehard MAGA support. Connection? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think these are the people, and I think part of the MAGA-verse has simply been, they think that they were going to overrule Obergefell. They think that we're going to, take the question of gay marriage out of the hands of the federal government, out of the hands of the Fed, the Supreme Court, return it to the states, and then those deep red states would make it illegal. I think that's part of their dream. I think that's part of, if it's not specifically part of Project 2025, it's something that they've dreamed about. Like, let's see how we can get rid of this. And now I want to get what's really interesting here, Shant, is that we have Supreme Court justices who were on the court 10 years ago, including the Chief Justice, who actually had a dissent in Obergefell, right? So he and Alito and Clarence Thomas, they were on the court, then they opposed it. They were opposed to it. That's now there's more conservative justices on the Supreme Court. And yet they couldn't get 4 votes. What does that tell you?
I mean, I think the tide has turned, and even this is something, or even this Supreme Court looks at this as something that is a fundamental right, and they're not willing to fold for the MAGA movement, and they're not willing to fold for the conservative interests that are backing these types of lawsuits and these types of challenges. Yeah.
Right. And I think this just demonstrates how public's changed. Now, I think that we can read into this a little bit, and let's try to read even a little deeper into this. That this probably wasn't going to be the case that they wanted to use, that they weren't going to use. They didn't see this as a possibility because the facts are really bad in this case, right? This is the same clerk who, after Obergefell came down 10 years ago, refused to issue marriage licenses and was jailed for contempt for 6 days. And then she got sued. And I guess it was around $300,000 she was found liable for violating the civil rights of gay couples.
That's right. Because if you refuse to issue a marriage license, which is something that is now the law of the land, as we talked about in Obergefell, you're violating someone's civil rights. So the couple that was impacted by this, that was discriminated against, sued this county clerk and won a jury award of $100,000 in compensatory damages. And then you tack on top of that the fees and things like that associated with it. Yeah, you're talking about a $300,000 judgment. So that's what this case was. The Davis versus Ermold case. That's what this was seeking to challenge. The Sixth Circuit affirmed that decision and affirmed the $300,000 in damages against Kim Davis, the clerk, who was previously jailed for refusing to issue marriage certificate. And now the Supreme Court has rejected a subsequent appeal of what the Sixth Circuit decided. So this is now sort of law of the land, or this doesn't change Obergefell. This doesn't change the framework.
Right. And I don't think we're saying that another case might come along and they might have a different view on it, but I think it's unlikely. I think this is not going to go the way of Dobbs, which is the case that overturned Roe v. Wade. I think that this is a clear loss for the MAGA universe. Whether Trump views this as a real significant issue or not, I don't know. Obviously, I don't, neither do I want to be in his head, nor do I have any idea what's going on in, his head. Right. But this is I don't think this is something that's at the core of the Trump presidency, and in some respects, they may look at this and go, gee, we're glad that, that issue didn't come out. But it's a bad issue it's a bad look for the MAGA universe to go after this. It's the right decision. It shows, like, for example, just 3 years ago, Justice Kavanaugh wrote an opinion where he affirmed Obergefell, right? So it's a little hard for him to come along now and say no. I bet Chief Justice Roberts' a personal opinion on this has changed in the last 10 years. I'm quite sure that Thomas and Alito are exactly the same place they were 10 years ago or 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, I think this is, I don't think you're going to see this case. I don't think you're going to see this again this term. You're going to see gay marriage again this term. You may not see it again ever, which, would be a blessing, and we can simply move on from this issue.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I hope that's the outcome here. And I hope that the organization, by the way, that's behind these challenges, whether it's Obergefell or it was a Masterpiece Cake case, all these gay marriage challenges, is this organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom, the ADF, not to be confused with the ADL or anything, the ADF. And it's a conservative organization. And it frames these fights as fights for religious freedom, fights for First Amendment rights, etc. But it's none of that. It's really backed by corporate interests that are looking for exemptions or to overturn anti-discrimination laws. That's all it comes down to. Much like everything in the MAGAverse, it comes down to some corporate interest benefiting. And look, this organization, it might sound like a very nice mission, to support religious freedoms and stuff. It's not. I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center, a very respected organization, legal organization comprised of excellent lawyers that go around and fight for people's rights, they've designated them as an anti-LGBT hate group. So, this organization challenging these things. And by the way, I also don't want anyone to think that the people bringing these challenges, the cake shop that was bringing the challenge, based on their refusal to make cakes for a gay couple, or even this county clerk. It's not some poor county clerk. These are cases backed by millions of dollars in corporate lobbying and funding. That's who's backing these folks that are bringing these challenges. It's not a mom and pop business that's really suffering that wants to bring the challenge. It's corporate interests. It's big lobbying money. That's the only person that's the only movement that's really bringing this. And it falls in line with the MAGA movement. So I hope the MAGA movement distances themselves from this, given these types of challenges. But we'll see how it shakes out. We'll see if other challenges like this come down or go up to the Supreme Court and how those shake out. And we'll keep you posted on it. Stay tuned. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This has been another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Again, a reminder, if you like this content, hit that subscribe button, support the other folks here that put out the great content on the Legal AF Network. Share your comments, hit that like button, share this with whoever you think might find it useful or moving at least. And we'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.